Howdy, and welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. This is episode number 140 with James Miller. He's a therapist who works with mental health, and we talk about ways to improve your mental health with exercise. He gives several tips and things that you can do that are anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes long of practices that you can implement, whether it's meditation or breathing. We talk about being out in nature. We talk about ways to overcome some of the roadblocks and the obstacles that we have that are sometimes built in, that are sometimes self-sabotaging, that are sometimes just the busyness of the world that we live in, and how to overcome those things, how to protect your mental health, how to improve your mental health, and how to look at it long-term so that you can create these habits that will last a lifetime. And you'll have these tools in your toolbox that you can pull out at any time you feel yourself starting to self-sabotage and starting to go down that wrong road that you know is going to lead to less success and less fulfillment and less happiness. Ways that we can just improve those, ways that we can change. And we go in deep about neurotransmitters and what they all do and how they're created and ways to help our bodies create them. So like I said, it is packed with information. It's a great episode to deal with mental health and how to improve naturally through just things that you have at your disposal without having to spend a lot of money to get them. So welcome, James, to the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here, Jerry. Thank you.
So, I think we have similar backgrounds as far as like an exercise, focus and things I know you focus a little bit on like the mental health side, like trying to help people get there. But as a physiotherapist, like a lot of people that might not understand what that term is, right? And so like explain a little bit about like what you do and what got you into what you're doing.
Sure. So as you know, I'm James Miller. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I've been in the mental health field for over 25 years. I had a very successful practice in the Washington, D.C. area. And I thought, I'm doing well, but I'm just not feeling like I'm really thriving. So from there, I went ahead and I came down here to sunny Florida and I started Lifeology. So Lifeology Radio has been on the air since national radio since 2017. Nice. I think at the time of this recording, we have about 430 shows and we're all the major markets in the US, which is really nice. I'm very humbled for that. But it is really neat to see how the concept of just our thoughts, so in psychology, we teach our thoughts determine our emotions determine what we do. Right. And so the concept of just mental toughness or mental well-being is incredibly important in everything we do. And so I'm excited to talk about your version of the physiology and the psychology and how those merge together to help us be the best optimal version of self.
Right. And so like exercise has a big part of it, right? And it's sort of like it's the missing link, but it shouldn't be, because like so many people don't realize how important exercise is to not just their brain function, but how it actually plays out in their thoughts and their mental well-being, right? Like I've heard many times that like if somebody's depressed, like one of the biggest, you could take some medication for it or, do something like, of course you could eat something that's like going to give you a real fast dopamine fix.
Sure.
It's not going to be a long-term fix at all, but exercise is the key.
Yes. And so sometimes people quantify exercise as being different. So I always talk about movement. So some people are really physically active. Other people may not be as ambulatory or be able to move as much, which is totally fine. But it's just something. One of my favorite quotes is the last person in the race beats the person on the couch. And the concept of that is to really be mindful of just physical movement a little bit more than you did before. And in doing that, that starts to create a change for you.
Right. And so like, is there, to lead into, like, is there a sweet spot? Is there if you do this much, you're going to get this much bang for your buck, and that's really where you want to be? Or is it truly individualized?
It really is individualized. I mean, ideally, we all have a concept of, working out or have physical movement per day. Yes, there is a structure for that. But I think if we're too wedded to what that formula is, sometimes people feel like, well, I can't do that, so I may as well not do anything at all. So I think it boils down to finding that sweet spot as far as when can you fit it into your day? When does it not feel like a chore? And when something feels like a chore, nobody wants to do chores. So nobody wants to do these things. And so it's kind of just figuring out the aspect of what type of physical movement do you like? Physical movement can be anything from getting up in the middle of the day, going for a walk around your office, coming back. That's physical movement. It can be running a marathon. It can be going to the gym. It can be walking your dog. There's all different ways in which physical movement can be created but the goal of it is just to increase your heart rate and to have some physical movement, because as we know, the movement itself, it allows for the muscular aspects of there's a lot of things that just physical movement does. And so that's one thing I'd have everybody really be mindful of. What does physical movement seem to them, or like what is it like for them? Right. And then to remember, when did I feel really healthy, and what was different in my life then versus now? Right. And can I perhaps re-implement some of those things that I did before?
Well, and so for some people, like, they maybe never have felt healthy.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Like, and that I think is going to happen more and more as we age in the next couple of decades, because the childhood obesity issues and the things that are going on now, that there's a lot of kids that probably have never understood what healthy feels like. And so as you get to that point, like, understanding that, and I've seen this both with my clients, but also in my own life, is like, I get to a point where I'm like, man, I used to be able to exercise this much and feel this great. And like, now it's changed, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so that changes over time, as far as part of it's because we age, but part of it's because like you said, it becomes routine. It becomes like, we're used to it. We're not getting the same benefit, even though subconsciously we may be getting the same benefit, but consciously we're missing something, right?
Sure.
Have you seen that happen?
I have. It made me think of this as well, as often just the aspects of like my version of healthy today as a 47-year-old man was very different when I was 25. At 25, I wanted to look a certain way. And of course, as I age enough, I'd still like to look like that. However, my metabolism is a little different. I'm just older. And so I don't choose to have as much time to put into it as I did when I was younger. So there's that choice component, but there's also the different aspect of what does healthy mean. So I know I said that at the beginning, but fit is one thing, healthy is another. So there's a scope of what that looks like. And so everybody can understand that, either going to their doctor and figuring out what that means for them specifically, and then to stay in that range. And if they want to increase their activity to perhaps have a physical transformation, that's something else they can do as well. So there's lots of ways in which it can be quantified or measured. But I think that's really important, because sometimes the people think, oh, there's just those two guys talking about the gym. I don't want to go to the gym. And that creates that negative feedback loop of, I don't want to be like them, or I'm intimidated to go to the gym, or I'm intimidated in general. So why try it at all? Right.
And from a mental health standpoint, like I was saying before, about like, you can have a depressive like moment in time, right? And that moment could be a day, it could be a week, it could be, or it could be a long-term diagnosis, right? And a lot of times people just say, oh, I'm depressed. And so it's like, they just fall into that, that grouping that they put themselves in. And it's like, oh, I can't do anything, or I can't do this, or it's not going to benefit me because I'm too far down the channel.
Correct.
Like, I'm too far down to be able to get any benefit from it, which is not true.
Yeah. One of the main things that, exactly. One of the main, so there's a minimum of 6 different types of depression. And so sometimes there's a chemical depression, which is the decrease of serotonin. So the way it works with serotonin is everybody has serotonin, but what happens, so it's a neurotransmitter that makes us feel good. So when one neurotransmitter, the serotonin, fires to the next one and the next one, what happens is each one of those neurons are a little selfish, if you will. And so they hold on to a little bit more than they should. So when they fire to the next one, that one holds on a little bit more. And pretty soon where it's supposed to go, there's not enough. And so that's why people can often feel depressed. So as we know, there's a linkage between meditation, exercise, healthy sexual lifestyles. All of that can create serotonin and dopamine, which can be really important, because if we're struggling with life in general, or perhaps it's a neurotransmitter, lack of serotonin, those physical movements is going to allow for serotonin to be created. And once that happens, then all of a sudden we may not feel as depressed as perhaps we did before.
Right. And so is that basically the thing that happens when, like, say, the runner's high? Is like you exercise to the point where it's like now you flooded your system.
Correct. So there's many different neurotransmitters. So there's dopamine, there's endorphins, there's serotonin, there's norepinephrine, there's adrenaline. All those wonderful things we can experience when we move beyond the threshold of when we think we can't do something. As we know, our body, if our body can't do something, it'll physically will stop. But it's usually our mind that says, I can't do this. And that's not the case at all. It's just our ability as a human. we often want to revert back to the least amount of energy output. So for example, if I sat on the couch all day today and then probably around 6 o'clock, I was like, oh, I need to go somewhere or get up. The idea of even getting up, because I've now moved the threshold to even being really quote lazy today, now to even get up, it's like, oh, it's too much. I don't want to do that. And so we find that whatever threshold we create for the day of how much movement or motivation we have, that becomes the norm for the day. And so we have to be really mindful about making sure that as we start our day, that motivation level is a little higher. So once it's higher, then we will be able to do those other things. But if we start our day in a way that's like, oh, I can't do this, or it's hard. And sure, we all have those days. But if that threshold is really low, then that sets the bar for how much emotional, physical output we want to have that day.
So I've heard, and that falls into something I've heard a lot in the last couple of years. And it's not new information. Like I said, like a lot of this stuff is not new. It's just like we just lost practice of it.
Yeah.
And how valuable that, a 15-minute bout of exercise or movement, it doesn't have to be like lifting weights or, a 15-minute sprint or anything but just 15 minutes of movement, like early in the morning, like in your first 30 or 45 minutes of being awake, how important that is, not to your physical health so much, but to your mental health.
Correct.
And setting up your day, right?
Exactly. I always tell people how you start your day is indicative of how your day is going to go. So for me, on a personal note, everyone's going to be different. But the way my day starts out is every morning when I wake up, I spend 30 minutes in my spirituality, with my higher power. And then from there, I move on to my physical well-being. And so obviously my schedule is very different than other people's. You can do whatever you want. You move the widgets around and make sense for you. So then I start do my physical movement. Which whatever that may be. Then from there, I use my mind, or at least I try to, throughout the day. And so that's a concept of, so it's really important to be mindful of how to use all three of those components and influence them, because as one increases, the more intellect we create. Well, we don't want to be lopsided. We've all seen those bodybuilders that have huge upper bodies and little chicken scrawny legs. We're like, well, that doesn't make sense. So it's the same type of thing when it comes to our spirit, mind, and body. And once again, spirit doesn't have to be religion. It's just, for me, the way I measure that is that cheerleader within ourselves to say, you're going to get through this, James, whether you think you can or not. So it's that hope that's within us. And so to be able to build those three things every single day allows for a person to be much more well-rounded, because if I'm physically exhausted, well, my spiritual side can encourage me, and then my intellect will figure out what I'm supposed to do. So that's one thing to really be mindful of. So as you start your day, it's you create your morning, create your success based off of really incorporating those three things. And so to answer your question, as far as the motivation aspect of it, a lot of people, when they are working out, I'd like to think of that as kind of like their metabolism.
Right.
So if I'm working out, I'm exercising, so that's going to burn off all the carbohydrates, fats, calories I've eaten that day, or it starts the kind of the funnel for that. So whatever I eat later, if my body's continuing to thermogize, or the thermogenics of that, then it's the same type of thing when it comes to your mental health. So if I'm working out all day, all that energy, perhaps that anxiety or nervousness or frenetic energy I have, as I work out, it already kind of pulls all the energy, and I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted. So anyone who struggles and has a lot of energy or just a lot of their mind to be able to physically purge all that through the energy burning of your body. It's the same type of thing when it comes to your metabolism, same type of thing when it comes to the metabolism of your emotions. So throughout the day, things aren't going to be as difficult for you because you've already kind of burned it off or created that funnel, that anything that excess energy of anxiety, when it hits it, it just burns it off and you don't feel it as much.
So that's, what you're describing is like what I've seen to some of my clients, because they'll come to me and they're like, we'll have a conversation and they're like, oh man, I'm so stressed out. And I'm like, okay, well, where's your exercise? Oh, I haven't been doing it, because work's too busy or whatever. And then I'll get them to the point where they're like, I don't care how busy I am at work, because I know if I miss my exercise, it's just going to get worse for me.
Yes. Right.
And so like it's one of those things that we've become as a society so focused on, our busyness and, like having our calendar full of things to do, that, when we want to stop, it's very easy to just go, oh, Netflix and chill. Right. Yeah. Like you said, like sit on the couch and then like you said, you just get in that, oh, I don't want to move because I'm on the couch, and I'm a runner and I run a lot. And I know that if I run in the morning, I'm a much better person. Like, because it's done but I'm going to run no matter what, because I know I have to.
Yeah.
But if I run in the afternoon because my schedule's busy in the morning or whatever, it's like my day is definitely different emotionally, crankier.
Same way.
Until I get the run done. And then it's like, okay, cool, I'm good. Even to the point where my wife will tell me, she's like, you didn't run today yet. Go run.
That's funny.
And I'm like, and my body's a little, I'm just a little different. And then like, I have to have a buffer zone from when I eat to when I run. Like otherwise my digestive system just goes crazy on me when I run, and I don't want that. And so she'll be like, you have to go run. I was like, yeah, but I just ate. I can't. Like, we have to wait a couple hours. And she's like, I can't handle this.
But we also have what's called a circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm, it's a fancy term to basically say the highs and lows, the energy movement of your day. Some people are morning people and they're wide awake and they can do many things. Some people aren't. They're more of a night person. So it's learning how to understand the rhythm of your day and the rhythm of the energy and how to really capitalize that. So a lot of times, like for me, since I wake up pretty early and I like to do the gym in the morning. If I don't go, for me, that's my physical movement. If I don't do that before 9, then my energy starts to get a little lower. And I'm like, oh. And then if anything after noon, forget about it. And it's like, I'll just go walk by the gym. So I've learned for me all my years that it is important for me to figure that out. So I have to really capitalize on that energy so I can be productive. And everybody's going to have something different. And of course, depending on their work schedule to determine when that is, but it's really mindful to think about that. That can also go with creativity. There are certain times of the day that I'm very creative, other times that I'm not. There's a 20-minute window where I just want to close my eyes and fall asleep for a quick little nap. And then once I reset and I wake up, totally fine. And so that's usually a sweet spot of a nap time for me. Right. And I think a lot of times people forget when it comes to creating a successful life, it's very structured. Now, when I say structured, it's not so structured in the sense of in 5 minutes, I have to do this or that. It's learning how to manipulate, or that's a strong word, learn how to navigate your energy levels and drop in the things that are important. So my work is this time, my workout is this time, my devotion time is this time. So all those things are very important, because when you can figure that out, it's going to be different for every single person. You'll find that you're able to have that successful life.
Well, yeah, and I think that's it. Very, success is different for every person, right? Of course. But I think as I've gotten older and aged and like talked to more people and like finding out what they want, and helping them with their nutrition, but it always comes down to like they want something bigger and better in life. Sure. That's why they want to change their nutrition or their exercise or get healthier. And it's you really do start to define success is completely different than maybe what you look at society, you look at, a TV show, or you see something, you're like, oh my gosh, like I want the fancy car or the big house or the, the job that pays this much so that I can do, whatever. But then you find out that when you get to the age that you are supposed to retire and be able to do all those things, you're so burnt out. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to hang out with anybody. You don't want to be anywhere because you're mentally just wiped. Right. And so doing all these things, like sacrificing, if you will, a little bit of that short-term success from what society says to work these things into your schedule builds you that long-term ability to do more, correct?
Correct. In my book, Life Lessons, I just wrote this. I have a specific chapter about that talks about how to really create a quality of life for yourself. Your quality of life is going to be very different than mine, or very similar. But so the way you can want to look at that is, the way I quantify quality of life is just the ease that I experienced, the ability to do things at a whim, and in a more methodical whim, but in a way where if I sometimes think if I want to make more money, I could, but if that's going to impact time with my family, maybe I don't need to do that right now. So it's learning how to move those things around. So one of the things I really teach is how to create the widgets of your life, or the categories of your life, is to, in other words, break your life down into as many components as possible. Your health, your wellness, your relationships, your intimate relationship, your nutrition, your spirituality, your finances, your work, your retirement, as many things as possible. And so when you can create all those things, it really helps a person break things down to the smallest components of their life. And then on this graph here, on the vertical line, we do is tick marks from 1 to 10. And then you can think about this for the past 6 months. Okay, what does fulfillment feel like in each of these categories?
Right.
So when you can conceptualize that and say, okay, maybe for my health and wellness, it's maybe like a 4. My spirituality, that's great. It's like, it's an 8. My relationship is here. So when you can look at all that, it's a really wonderful snapshot to say, oh, okay, these are some really wonderful areas of my life. And then there's some areas that aren't going so well. So it's learning how to be able to recognize what does that look like for you. And so that's a really good framework for people to say, I want to do more of this or I want to do less of this.
Right. Well, and you used a great word that I think we should probably use in substitute of success when we think about like when you said fulfillment, like, are you fulfilled? You know? And I think that because success makes us think about like how we compare to other people.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, and like you said, like anybody that runs a race is better than the person that didn't run a race when it comes to their
healthier,
exercise, right? And so it's like, you know, it's not about, and I know this as a coach when I've coached athletes, and I'm like, you know, only one person's going to win the race.
That's true.
Right. You know, as far as like the success and gets the glory and the gold medal or whatever it is, right? But everybody can run their best, right? Exactly. Everybody in the race can still run their fastest race ever, or compete the best that they can on that day, and like so there's a lot of other things that you fulfill yourself versus reaching that, you know, that one thing. And so I think a lot of times too with mental health, we put our mindset on what we should be achieving is different than what we actually can achieve and like, you know, are going to be fulfilled by achieving. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it does. And often what happens is people have this goal, but if they don't believe they can complete the goal, well, then it's just a thought. There's no buy-in to that. And everything we do, there has to be a buy-in. I'm sure with your clients, there's a buy-in as far as you say, how much, first off, perhaps what's the cost, or can you buy into that? The time and energy, can you do that? Can you buy into my advice? So there's a lot of buy-ins that happen. And so if we have this goal, but we haven't emotionally bought into it, then it's just a great dream. But there's the reality of it being successful is pretty low. People don't realize it actually takes on average 66 times for a behavior to be enacted before it becomes a habit. People usually think it's 21, but that's typically why you'll find people aren't really successful. Perhaps they're the New Year's resolutions for going to the gym is because they only go 3 weeks. Yeah. And you know, it's sad, but people like me that have been in the gym for a while, which is just what I do, to go there and to see that and be excited for people for the New Year's, but no. Fortunately, a lot of these people aren't going to be here at the end of the month, right? Which is unfortunate, but that just comes back to the idea of if we don't practice something long enough, it's not going to become a habit. Right. So it's really, like I said, 66 days on average for something to become a habit. So perhaps all your listeners right now can keep that in mind when they want to make a change, because if they don't do it long enough, they may not be as successful.
Right. Well, and then that plays obviously into your mental health, right? Because then you start negatively talking to yourself about, you know, I wanted to make this change at the beginning of the year or whenever it was, and I wasn't able to follow through because, you know, I'm a failure. It's typically where it goes, right? Like that might not be the reason you failed.
Sure,
you know,
of course.
There could be all kinds of excuses and this is one of the reasons why I often tell people, I'm like, if you live in North America, don't do January 1st as your like New Year's resolution date. But with going to the gym, because you know what's going to happen? You're going to have snowstorms. You're going to have cold weather.
Sure.
And you're usually changing your routine to say, most of them are, I'm going to wake up before work and go get it done. Right. And so you're going to wake up and you're going to step outside and you're going to be like, holy crap, it's cold. Like, I don't want to go to the gym right now, you know? Yeah. And so that willpower to do it is going to burn out, like you said, within that 21 days. And then it's going to be, and so I always tell people, like, wait till spring break. I know you want the spring break body and that's why you're doing, but wait until it's a little warmer. And then try and start doing something, because then you can do stuff outside as far as movement. And it's not just relegated to, since it's so cold and I don't have the equipment at home, I have to go to the gym. Like the possibilities are much bigger if you wait until the weather changes and it's a little bit warmer and you're able to do those things. Plus the mental health side of like being out in nature and, you know, getting sunlight and all those things, like those are huge, right? Like that's a huge part of our mental health.
A lot of times people don't realize that seasonal affective disorder can affect majority of us. And so down here in Florida, less than 2% of people actually experience seasonal affective disorder. For those of you who don't know what that is, seasonal affective disorder is essentially just that time of the winter, maybe end of fall, winter, as people experience this depression. Like, wow, I just don't know what's going on. And like you said, a lot of it has to do with sunlight. So vitamin D, we absorb vitamin D through our skin. And so with our windows, we actually have a filter there, so we can actually absorb vitamin D through windows. So you have to actually absorb it outside. But when it's cold out, everybody's going to be bundled up, and nobody wants to be outside when it's cold. So that's why you'll find a lot of people who have seasonal affective disorder is it's linked with a low vitamin D deficiency. So it's always good to have your vitamin D levels checked and speak with your licensed healthcare provider about getting some type of supplement. The other thing people can do is there's actually what's called a light therapy box. And what it is, it's essentially just a little box, and it has a LED light in it, and it has to have, I think, 10,000 lumens, or in other words, that's the wattage in it. And so every morning for 15 minutes, you put it at 45 degrees from your face. You can get ready in the bathroom, etc. But what it does is it actually stimulates serotonin. And so it's a really good way that when people use that, it gives them a lot of energy. It gives them the serotonin, it gives them a little boost. And so that can really help offset seasonal affective disorder.
And it's a like, I mean, obviously it's an artificial because you're not bringing the sun into your bathroom or whatever, but it's natural because your body naturally produces these neurotransmitters.
Certainly.
And so it's not necessarily
just stimulates it.
Yeah. It's not going for a chemical that you're ingesting that could have toxins or,
certainly.
You have no idea if it's actually.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's funny.
I practice or not, or
years ago, when I was in my private practice, for one office, I didn't have a window. And so I had one of those lights on all day. And my patients would call it my crazy light. And I put that with quotations because I had so much energy. It's like, James, shut that off. And so it's funny. So I know as someone, I don't struggle with seasonal affective disorder, but I know the power of that light, how much serotonin it can create. I was incredibly happy. And so it's wonderful in a lot of ways in that respect. So I highly recommend that. And you can find stuff like that on Amazon or other e-commerce stores. Right. So just simply look up light therapy box.
Right. That's cool. I hadn't heard of that. I might have to look into that because I mean, I live in Texas, but I always say we're 10 months out of the year. We've got plenty of sunlight and all that. Mm-hmm. But like if it goes a week and I don't see the sun, oh my gosh, like
it's hard.
Like it's hard, and I can run all that I want, and it's still going to be tough on me.
Yeah.
And so it's just like I don't like from that standpoint of it. I was like, oh, I could never be the person that goes and lives off in the woods.
That's right.
Because it's just like not being able to see the sun is just
that is hard.
It drives me nuts, and so I totally get how important that is, and that. It's that natural piece of it, right? It's instead of taking a substance to get there, your body
synthetic substance,
your body knows how much you need, and it's going to crave those things, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're feeling like I should go sit outside, like you should probably go sit outside.
Certainly, exactly.
Right. Your body's going to tell you the things that you need, and it's when you ignore them because you're in the middle of a Netflix episode or you're or even if you're at work and you're stuck and you're like, okay, I really got to do this. Your body's going to tell you to take that 10 minutes to go step outside.
Yeah. You'll sense this nervousness or this energy, like, I just don't want to do this anymore. What people don't really realize is that self-sabotage can happen as early as 3 seconds. So for example, you talked about those individuals who wake up early in the morning, have their New Year's resolution to wake up at 5 a.m. That's very ambitious. And so if a person hasn't woken up that early before, but all of a sudden they're implementing this 5 a.m. call time, as soon as the alarm goes off, if they think about it longer than 3 seconds, they're going to stay in bed. They're going to hit the snooze button and be like, I'll start tomorrow, or I'll start at lunch. Right. And then pretty soon lunch happens, like, oh, I have more work to do, or I don't want to sweat. And then we say, well, let me do it later. And so we keep putting things off. So it's really important to, anytime anyone wants to make a change or do something that's healthy for them, is be mindful, what are the blind spots? So within 3 seconds, what are my thoughts going to be? So for example, this person that wakes up at 5 a.m., as soon as the alarm goes off, they have to immediately get up and already have perhaps their gym clothes ready, perhaps have their pre-workout, their coffee, whatever it is. So it's not this ability to say, oh, let me think about it. Because if you think about it, we're going to default, like I said at the beginning of this interview, we'll default back to the emotional level that we've created our day with. So as soon as you can stand up, you've now created an emotional threshold that's elevated. And then from there, you'll be able to do what it is you want to do.
Right. Yeah. It's often that's taking that first step.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing is well, even throughout the day, if people are like, oh, I have all these chores I have to do, or I have to do this or that. If you just focus on the first 30 seconds of just standing up, that is half the battle. Once you stand up, once again, you've now literally elevated yourself. The emotional threshold or the energy output is now increased. And so now that I'm standing up, it's easier for me to then decide what it is I want to do. But if we just stay on the bed and try and make a decision, or even the couch, make a decision to do something that has a lot of energy, that's going to be difficult. So we're thinking too far out. So if you just focus on the first aspect of just standing up, put all your energy there, you stand up, you'll find that you can do all these other things you wanted to do. Right. And then be mindful of the 3-second rule. So if I have to stand up, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. But if I wait longer than 3 seconds, et cetera. But if I can focus on just standing up, I'll see there's a huge difference in my routine.
Well, and then that just builds, right? Because like whether you actually keep a physical, list of here's my tasks for the day or my to-do list I've got to do, or you're a person that says, oh, I don't do lists. We've all got a list in our head of things that have to be done, right? Like we all know that we have to do this chore or that chore, or, this bill has to be paid. So we have to go sit down and actually do this or whatever. And a lot of times just being able to, whether you notice it in the middle of your day or not, but like you sit down at the end of the day and you go, oh my gosh, I got a lot done today. Mm-hmm. Like that changes your mental aspect, right? And like your it can really boost your mental health. And so that's an easy is the wrong word because it's not sometimes easy. Sure. But simple, maybe tasks of just do the simple things. And so if you're having that bout of depression for whatever reason, and especially if you can't figure out what it is, it's just some piece of life or if it's the seasonal affective disorder, you can just knock things off and you're going to make yourself feel better.
Yeah. With those individuals who may be listening now, who may not be able to move, maybe are in a wheelchair, or there's sometimes people can feel left out. One way we can do this that's maybe a little bit different. It's not physical movement, but we've all heard of what gratitude is, and there's so many wonderful people who talk about it. But sometimes people don't talk about what it really is. So gratitude, if you do this in this type of way from a mental health standpoint. So there's been many research studies done that show that people who meditate have a 60% increase in the dopamine and serotonin levels. Oh, wow. Which is a lot. That's a lot. If you're not able to meditate, or not able to move rather, the way to meditate is this. And sometimes people think, well, I just can't meditate. I can't sit still. Mm-hmm. Anytime you think about something longer than you probably should, that's meditating. So if I'm worried about something and I think about it, I'm meditating on that worry. Mm-hmm. If I meditate on something that's more maybe proactive, then I'm meditating on that. But it doesn't mean you have to sit down and do whatever. Meditation is just simply the ability to focus on something for an extended period of time. So the way we really work with gratitude is this. So we link together the meditation. So like I said, 60% increase in uptick in serotonin and dopamine. And from that, what you do though, is you use your internal 5 senses. So you want to think of the happiest memory you can think of, or that maybe someone that you really enjoy spending time with. You think about that person. And then when you think about it, then you use your internal 5 senses. What does this person look like? So I'm closing my eyes, I'm thinking about this person or this event, and I can see the whole event around that. I can see, perhaps what the setting is. Mm-hmm. I can see what the person looked like. I can see the smile on their face. And then I use my sense of hearing. Well, what was said? And I can focus on that person's voice. I can focus on my surroundings. What did I physically feel? What was I wearing? How did that feel like? If I gave them a hug, what did that feel like? What is sense of taste? Were we eating something, drinking something? Was there salt on my tongue? And then what did it smell like? If I'm here at the ocean, so you can smell the brine and you can smell that in the ocean, which is great. So when you can really sit with all of those internal 5 senses in that memory and hold on to that, you'll see a huge uptick in your dopamine levels, which that is really what gratitude is, because you physically embody with those 5 senses what that memory is, and it creates so much dopamine within you that's really what gratitude boils down to.
Wow. That's cool. So really, you don't have to have necessarily something recent. That could be
certainly
something long term ago. That you're just trying to, bring that memory back up, and for lack of a better word, transport your brain to that moment where it was like, oh, I felt great here. I want to go back to that, and not necessarily living in the past. But just bringing that and then taking that uptick in neurotransmitters and then going on to the rest of your day.
Correct. Yeah. So let's say people are at work and they can't do physical movement, then use that little technique. That's a wonderful technique. And so, like I said, people who aren't able to have physical movement, that version of serotonin is really important as well. So there's many different ways in which it can be implemented. The other really cool thing, people don't realize this, it'll give a big uptick in dopamine as well, is altruism. Altruism is a fancy term that basically says we do something for someone else without wanting anything in return. What's really interesting though Jerry, is if I want to give, let's say I see a person who's in need of money and they ask me for money. And so I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. Or other times I say yes. And so if I give it to them and let's say there's people around, I'm thinking, oh, I wonder, can these people see me do this? Mm-hmm. So what's your brain and your body can't be tricked with what your true motivation is. If I truly do something altruistically, I will get a hit of dopamine. Right. If my motivation is different and I'm not doing it because I want to be altruistic, perhaps I'm looking at people think I'm great or whatever it might be, then that is the reward I'm going to get, is just simply my perception of how people perceive me. Right. But when you do something to truly be benevolent, truly be altruistic, you'll find that your body releases dopamine. And that's why after you do something, like, oh, I feel really good. And then it's a nice feeling to have for however long that lasts, 5 minutes to an hour when you think about it. But those moments are natural ways in which you can increase your dopamine and serotonin levels, is by doing something that's altruistic. And then later on, you can think about that memory and re-experience that again. So there's many ways in which that can be done. And so we have the physical movement of the brain versus physical movement of our body.
Right. And anytime we're increasing those good neurotransmitters, we're giving ourselves the ability to be more productive.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Certainly.
And that's one of the things that I always tell people is like, if you exercise on a regular basis, yes, you're going to have the health benefits and all of that, but like your productivity at work is going to go up anywhere from 15 to 30%. Mm-hmm. And so like, wouldn't you want that? Like,
I know, right?
Like, especially if you're striving for a promotion or you're like, you're trying to get to the next level. It's like, here's a way that if you take, 5% of your day and go exercise on a regular basis, and you get 15 to 30% return at work, like it seems like for lack of a better word, it seems like a no-brainer. Sure. It should be just like boom, right?
Yeah.
But
and it is something
we're busy.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the thing with, when it comes to the business levels of our life, sometimes we think we just don't have time to do things, but perhaps even when I want downtime, if I don't build a downtime into my schedule, then I'm not going to have time to do it, because if my day is already busy, then I'm not going to be able to do it. What many people don't realize though, Jerry, is that when you build in those downtimes, where most people struggle is they don't build in, when is this going to be done? So if I give myself a 10-minute break, okay, I can do that, but let's say I sit down on the couch. Well, then we know how that is. I'm reverting back to my new energy threshold, and I don't want to do much. So that's why you have to put the end cap on it and say, in 10 minutes, set my alarm, do whatever it is. As soon as this goes off, I've now committed to doing the next thing. And so that's why people struggle, is because when they have those downtimes, their boundaries or internal boundaries aren't strong enough, or they haven't thought about it. And so all of a sudden that 10 minutes turns into an hour, and pretty soon the hour turns an hour and a half, like, oh my gosh, I'm behind schedule. And then we get all riled up again, and then it creates all this energy and frenetic energy.
Right.
So that's why it's really good that in our schedule to build in, when does something end? When it comes to moderation, everything we can do and really enjoy that, as long as it doesn't negatively impact the next thing. Right. And so that's the concept of moderation, is to be able to fully embody something. And I talk about moderation in a healthy way, whatever those things are. And then from there, then transition into something else. So if I am out with friends all night and it's wonderful, but if that affects my 5 a.m. gym time that we talked about, well, then that's not a healthy moderation. So it's learning how to set the end time of saying, yes, I'm going to go out with my friends, for example, but I need to be in bed, or I need to be home by 9. So let me enjoy it as much as I can. By 9 p.m., I hold myself accountable to that, go home, which then in the morning, I can wake up and do the next thing I need to do.
Right. Well, and speaking about like things like that, where you're going out at night, and obviously, I think most of us, if we go out with friends in the evening for a party or whatever, we're getting that good neurotransmitter hit, right? We're getting those vibes and everything. And so is there a difference between time of day? Obviously, if you build those things up in the morning, you're going to have a more productive day as you go through the day. But if you build them up at night, does it affect your sleep, or is it like you don't want to overdose?
It really depends. Yeah, it really depends, because for example, oxytocin. So for those of you who may not know what oxytocin is that social hormone, that love hormone. Of when you see someone you love, your eyes light up. You see your kids, you see your parents, you see whomever, you get excited. And so that is a wonderful feeling that doesn't, it allows for the excitement of it, but that is something where you feel peace after that. Now, of course, if there's a lot of adrenaline, let's say we're out with friends, we're literally running around or doing something rambunctious, that energy level is going to be higher, and it'll be harder for people to slow down. So it's not necessarily should they do it or should they not do it. there are ways in which a person can lay down when they sleep and be able to calm their mind down so they don't feel all that adrenaline. So there's many ways, through the meditation aspects of it, through other ways in which someone can calm down. For example, oxytocin, if someone's struggling, oxytocin is a wonderful, another neurotransmitter, another hormone that people can experience. So therefore it doesn't allow them to feel so sad or so lonely. So ways in which people can improve oxytocin levels is if they have someone, a significant other, to give someone a hug lasting longer than 20 seconds increases oxytocin. To stare at someone, in a healthy way, yes, to gaze lovingly into someone's eyes. Let me clarify that. For a certain period of time, for over 60 seconds, that'll also increase oxytocin as well. If people have a pet, they're living by themselves, they have a pet, the actual physical touch of that, which is a self-soothing behavior, it actually can lower a person's heart rate, and it can actually increase oxytocin not only for the person, but also for their pet as well.
Right. Yeah, it's funny when you said it's like we're talking about gazing into somebody's eyes. The first thing I thought was like the difference when you walk into a restaurant and you see two people that are sitting across from each other on obviously their date or their whatever. Yeah. And then you see, an older married couple that's sitting side by side in a booth looking off, and there's nobody with them. There's just the two of them.
Sure.
And it to me, it's always like which I know that's some people's sure. life, and that's what they want to do, and that's great. For me though, it's always like that's a little awkward. Like, don't you want to look at the person and like enjoy them and like, and maybe that's what they're trying to avoid. I don't know.
That's funny. But to piggyback off that as well is to set the tone for any reconnection with someone. So say you come home with your wife, or I'm here as well. So the first 2 minutes of any interaction with someone sets the tone. Right. So let's say a person's off at work and they come home and they're talking to their spouse, or their spouse tries to talk to them and they just say, "Oh, I'll talk to you later," or give me a few minutes. You set the tone for this misconnection or this disconnection. So the first 2 minutes is so important that when you reconnect with someone, to give them that time, allow for that rejoining. So you can once again increase oxytocin by giving each other hugs, by lovingly staring into each other's eyes. That sets the tone. And then the person, whomever comes home, he or she can go change and decompress and then come back together. But that's something really important. So we're talking about a lot of different ways in which to change the neurotransmitters in your brain based off of doing simple things. And I say simple meaning things we do every single day. So it's just learning how to tweak that to say, oh, I'm not kind of struggling here. Let me think of a really good memory and increase my dopamine levels. Let me do something kind for someone to increase my dopamine levels. Let me focus on this to increase my oxytocin levels. So there's ways in which we can move those things in our life that we do all the time, but the more intentional we are about it, the more we can live the life on our terms.
Right. Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there. It's like, it's the intentionality piece of it. It's the scheduling, if you will. And you said this earlier about, it's not trying to be so routine and so,
correct.
It's not a drill sergeant way of going through.
Not at all.
You got to do but you need to know the tools, right? So that if you have that moment, that you can pull it out, that you can know that like, okay, here's, like you said, it's simple. Here's a simple little thing I can do. It shouldn't take very long. Granted, if it's an exercise thing and it's 30 minutes or whatever, it might take a little bit longer, but a lot of these things, like you described, are 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and then you can get that boost that can take you through the next hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, however long you need. And that's one of the things that I talk to people about on the nutrition side. Is like, if you feel yourself getting to the point where you're hungry and it's not like a time for you to sit and have a meal, then like it's okay to get a snack to subside that. Just make sure you have something handy that's healthy. Right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Your nuts or your carrots or whatever. It's like, have something small that you can have. And it's the same thing. It's like, it's just a planning piece. So if you know these things, you can plan for them and be ready. Like, oh, I feel myself going that way. Let me sit and do this.
Yeah. It make me think about this as well. I remember there were times I would come home from when I was in my practice, I was like 12, 13 patients a day, which is absurd. But I come home and I'm just exhausted. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I have these Tostito chips. Let me have a couple with this salsa. And the next thing I know, the whole bag's gone. Yep. And then I would be like, James, what are you doing? But then I realized, and this is something I was trained in, but I didn't think it through in the moment, is our body often struggles between understanding the difference between hunger, thirst, and sleep. Yes. And so if I'm emotionally exhausted, then all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, I'm really hungry. And I'm not hungry. It's just I've confused my sleepiness, or perhaps even my dehydration, with hunger. And so when I started to eat, and I'm like, oh, I'm so hungry. Why am I hungry? Well, I'm not. My body is struggling with regulating the difference between the hunger, thirst, and sleep.
Right. No, that's something I often tell people is that, like, when they're like, yeah, I seem like I'm snacking all the time. I'm like, well, are you really hungry? Or how much do you drink? And they're like, oh, I don't ever drink anything. I'm like, okay, well,
that's probably the case.
That's probably what it is. You're probably thirsty. Your mouth needs something. Your body needs something. And you just automatically go, this will give me the dopamine hit that'll make me feel better because it's, sweet or whatever it is. Cause that's usually what, people go for.
If I remember correctly, our brain becomes dehydrated within 20 minutes. So it's always important to keep the hydration hydration level up. And I'm sorry to cut you off. Every 20 minutes, we have to make sure we have fluids or have water, because it allows for us it decreases the cognitive fog, which basically means, I can't, what am I trying to think? I can't think that through. So when we're hydrated, obviously our brain works and we're smarter in that respect.
Right. Well, and I've got a friend who's in the medical industry, and he went to a conference, I guess it was about a year ago. And he was always butting heads with me about, like, because I tell people drink a gallon of water. We live in Central Texas. Like, it was 10 months out of the year, it's 85 to 90 degrees. Like, you're sweating a ton if you go outside at all. And I'm like, you need a gallon of water. If you do exercise, you probably need a little bit more than that. But like, and he's always butting heads. He's like, I don't think you need that much. I don't think you need. He went to this conference and he said the guy was talking about hydration, and he said the easy thing to do is 2 ounces every 15 minutes. You'll stay hydrated. Your body will function well.
It's perfect.
Like, and I was like, and he goes, so what do you think about that? I said, well, how long are you awake? I got all up. And he's like, damn it, that's a gallon in it. I was like, yeah, that's pretty close.
That's hysterical. That is really funny.
And it's really true. Like, for people that don't hydrate first thing in the morning, like if you're not getting a glass of water when you wake up, and I know it seems it for some people it's like, well, I get up, the first thing I do is I go to the bathroom, right? And so I'm full of liquid, I got to get it out, I go to the bathroom. I'm like, oh well, if I just got rid of that, I should be hydrated but it's like, you got to remember that you're dehydrating as you sleep, right?
Exactly.
Like you just said, if it's 20 minutes and your brain's dehydrated, like, well, if you're sleeping for 8 hours, that's a lot of 20-minute segments.
Yes, it is.
And so getting that water in first thing in the morning, before your coffee, before your just to stimulate that hydration. And I know that days when I do that, like days when I forget to do that, and then when I do get that first, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can feel it going through, and it's like, oh my gosh, like I forgot like how quickly I needed this. And granted, I'm super in tune with my body, and so some people may not feel that, right? If they're not healthy, they may not feel that immediate like feeling as the water hydrates their whole body. But when you do, it makes you realize how much you missed it.
Yes. And the more dehydrated a person is, it actually affects your mental health. It affects your mood. So that when someone is the more dehydrated someone becomes, people can become, they can have psychosis, or they can see different things, but become more sensitive. We become more agitated. And so our mood becomes really dysregulated the more dehydrated we are. So there's so many wonderful things. So obviously hydration, that's important. And if I remember correctly, and I'm sure one of your listeners will correct me because I'm not 100% sure on that, remember this, but I remember in my studies, it was, I think for every 8 ounces of caffeine you have, caffeinated drink, it actually decreases, or it actually dehydrates you. So you have to, it becomes a deficit. So for every 8 ounces of that, you're like, oh crap, if I have all this coffee, now I need to drink more water. Right. And I'm sure you teach this as well, is that 90% of 90% of serotonin is actually created in our gut. Right. Yep. So with what you teach them as well, it's going to help them recognize, okay, well, there's serotonin aspects. Let me be mindful of that. 50% of dopamine is created in our gut as well. So we have 90% and 50%. And so what we eat is really what we become. And so, we all have, different choices of what we make, but if people are looking for potential alternate ways to increase their mood and their health, as we talked about today, the exercise is important, the food intake is important, the hydration is important. Some of these interpersonal things we can do with other people, or just using our internal five senses, can create all these neurotransmitter increase and influx in that, which can help people live a more healthy, productive life. Right.
And just that, you mentioned it with petting your dog or whatever, but like, just walking, if you have a significant other or somebody that you're connected with, whether it's parent or child or whatever, like just going on a walk and holding their hand.
Certainly.
And it's one of you is going to be higher than the other mood wise, and you're going to balance each other out, right? Yeah. And typically it's not it can happen in, I guess, extreme cases, but usually the person that's lower is being brought up and not the other way around.
Yeah.
And so that's another, key thing to do is that if you're feeling down, like go and invite somebody, that's always the upbeat, positive person and always
sure.
like go hang out with them for an hour,
Yeah.
And feed off of their energy.
Yeah.
It's another way to do it. It's just that relationship touch and stuff. So
yeah, it is important. But I think, and to piggyback off that, it's also the intention as well. So if I work out, so for today, I just wanted to increase my heart rate. I wanted to burn a certain number of calories. That was my intention. That was my goal. I accomplished that. Right. I thought, well, if I could do more, if I have the energy for it, I will do that. But this is my minimum goal. Same thing when you go for a walk. I want to enjoy nature. I want to, enjoy this conversation with someone, going back. So there are ways in which we can all move those things around, but it has to be with the intention. Right. And so that's when we're intentional about what we do. I'm intentional about going to sleep. So let me shut everything off. I'm intentional about having this conversation with you. So I'm going to be really, very focused on this. So everything we do, whether we realize it or not, we have an intention, but the more focused you are on that intention, the more successful you'll be on the other side of it.
Right. That's awesome. And I think that's a good summation of where we can bring this conversation to a close, just from a time standpoint. But before we do that, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your book, talk about what you do, talk about how people can connect with you if they have questions.
Sure.
Promote yourself a little bit.
Oh, wonderful, Jerry. Thank you so much. I'm really honored that you asked me to be a guest on your show today. I love your show. You're doing fantastic work. For those who want to learn more about me, simply go to jamesmillerlifeology.com and you can find out where you can hear the radio show. It's also archived on all major podcasting platforms. I'm really big on Instagram, so go to @jamesmillerlifeology. I'm there. Please say hi to me there as well. My book, Life Lessons, You Are the Expert on Your Life. It's a workbook. It's really kind of cool in the sense of, I wrote it for those times when you don't know what to do. We've all seen the self-help books, which are fantastic, which gives you a template of, let me read this for a certain period of time and then I'm going to change. But if I'm struggling at the moment, I'm like, I don't have time to read a whole book. So this book is really written into really small 2 to 3 bit little segments. And so what I help you focus on is when did you feel this emotion before, whatever it is you're dealing with?
Right.
When did you feel it before? What did you do that worked? What did you do that did not work? So I help you kind of re-implement that to say, okay, if I'm really sad, well, what did I do that stopped me from being sad, or I didn't feel, wasn't as sad? And then in each chapter, it also gives you the framework of how to reframe it. So therefore, you can change your mood based on doing healthy things done in the past. This reframe gives you the ability to look at something in a different way. So it's 9 different segments. Anything you're looking at in your life has these quick little chapters. And it's something that I've been blessed that many people have said it's helped them quite a bit. So Life Lessons, You Are the Expert on Your Life workbook. You can buy it on Amazon or simply go to jamesmillerlifeology.com.
Awesome. And I'll put the links for all those things in the show notes. So anybody that's listening and wants to, they'll be able to get to it really quickly. So
awesome. Thank you, Jerry.
I greatly appreciate you being a guest on the show. I think it's been a ton of great information. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head that like you have to be intentional about it. And if you're intentional, you can really change your life in a positive way. And if you're not, like you said, you're going to wind up sitting on the couch for too long and then wondering where everything went.
Certainly. Right. Well said.
All right. Thanks, James.